Okay, so before I even get into everything, the chaos, the humiliation, the kiss that absolutely should not have happened, I need to tell you about the moment I woke up and realized my entire life had just flipped upside down. Because one second, I'm dreaming about plantains and a beach back home, and the next second there are brown eyes. Warm, dangerous, beautiful brown eyes, staring down at me like I'm the most interesting thing they've ever seen. And those eyes, they belonged to the one person I was never, ever supposed to be caught sleeping in front of. But let me back all the way up because this story doesn't start there. It starts a lot messier than that. I need you to picture something for me. Picture a man, not just a man. The kind of man that makes your brain malfunction mid-sentence. Tall, built like someone sculpted him just to embarrass the rest of the population. Tattoos crawling up his arms and disappearing under his shirt, like a story you'd sell your dignity to finish reading. A jaw so sharp it looked like an argument, and eyes that didn't just look at you, they studied you. Slow, deliberate, like he already knew exactly what you were going to do before you did it. That was Woojin. And the first time I ever saw him, really saw him, I was in his bed. Not like that. Well, not yet. God, okay. If you're new here, subscribe, like, and comment first because this story is the kind that requires a snack and a comfortable chair. Like, go get comfortable, I'll wait. Because what happened that summer in Seoul changed everything, and I need you to understand every single layer of how absolutely unhinged it got. My name is Alaia, 23 years old, Dominican. From a tiny apartment in Santo Domingo, where the ceiling fan worked maybe 3 days out of 7, and my mother's rice was the best thing about every single day. I came to South Korea on a lie, not a small lie, not a little stretch of the truth, a full, documented, government-stamped lie, a forged work visa, a fake employment history, a name that wasn't quite mine on paper. I'm not proud of it, but when the opportunity came, a placement agency, a job at one of the wealthiest households in Seoul, more money in 1 month than my family saw in a year, I didn't think twice. I thought about my mother's medication. I thought about my little brother's school fees. I thought about the ceiling fan, and I signed the papers, the Hyunju family. If you're Korean, you already know the name. If you're not, imagine a family so wealthy that wealth itself seems almost too small a word for what they have. The patriarch, Hyun Dae-sang, had built a tech empire that stretched across 3 continents. His wife, Madam Hyun, was the kind of beautiful that had clearly been maintained very deliberately and very expensively, and she moved through the house like she owned the air in it. Because, honestly, she probably did. Their home wasn't a house, it was a compound. Marble floors so clean they made you feel guilty for breathing near them. Art on walls I was scared to dust. Rooms I hadn't even been inside yet after 2 weeks on the job. And me? I scrubbed it all. I cleaned bathrooms at 5 in the morning. I polished silverware I could never afford to eat with. I pressed my uniform every night so the crease was perfect because Madam Hyun noticed things. She noticed things. The kind of woman who would run a white-gloved finger along the top of a door frame and look at you like you'd personally offended her ancestors if she found a speck. I kept my head down. I did my job. I smiled when I was supposed to smile and disappeared when I wasn't needed. That was the plan. Get in, work, send money home, get out before anyone looked too closely at my paperwork. The plan was fine. The plan was going perfectly fine until they told me the young master was coming home. Alaia. Mrs. Park, the head housekeeper, found me in the kitchen on a Wednesday evening. She was a small, neat woman in her 50s, with the kind of expression that never really changed, calm on the surface, permanent low-level stress underneath. I'd learned to read the tension in her shoulders. Right now, they were up around her ears. "Yes, Mom?" "Young Master Woojin returns tomorrow." She said it like a warning. His room must be perfect. Madam has specified, perfect, Alaia. Not acceptable. Not good. Perfect. I nodded. Of course. He despises disorder. He despises dust. He despises anything that suggests the space wasn't prepared specifically for him. She paused. "Do you understand what I'm telling you?" "I'll take care of it." She looked at me for a moment longer than necessary, like she was deciding whether to say something else. Then she gave a small nod and walked away. That was Wednesday evening. By Thursday morning, I had deep cleaned that room twice. The windows were spotless. The floors reflected the light. His bed sheets, imported high thread count, the kind that felt like liquid against your hands, were changed and pressed flat without a single wrinkle. His bathroom smelled like cedar and clean water and money. His bookshelves were organized. His wardrobe had been wiped down. His desk surface was clear. I was done by noon. Then Mrs. Park came back and said, "Do it again." I blinked. "I'm sorry." "Madam wants it done again. Fresh flowers, different arrangement. The bathroom tiles. She wants them hand-polished." A pause. "And the grout." "The grout. By this evening." I stared at her. She stared back. Neither of us said what we were both thinking. I went and polished the grout. I hadn't eaten since 6 that morning. I'd been on my feet since 4. By the time I finished the second deep clean, it was past 8 in the evening, and I was running on nothing but stubbornness and the distant memory of breakfast. And the thing about that room, Woojin's room, was that it was warm, not hot, just warm. The temperature was regulated, the lighting was soft, and his bed, that ridiculous, obscenely comfortable bed, was right there in the center of the room like a dare. I sat on the edge of it to catch my breath. Just for a second. That was my mistake. Not the sitting, not even the lying back. Just for one moment, just to let my spine decompress. The mistake was the warmth, the silence, the exhaustion that had been building for 2 straight days, finally deciding it had waited long enough. I was asleep before I even knew I was falling. And that's where we came in, because the dream about the beach and the plantains got interrupted, and I surfaced slowly, not all at once, the way you do when you've been deeply, completely gone. And the first thing I registered was warmth. Then a scent, something clean and expensive and faintly woody. And then, when I finally opened my eyes, brown eyes, staring, not startled, not angry, not doing any of the things I would have expected from someone who just found a stranger sleeping in his bed. Just staring. With this expression that was part amusement, part something else I couldn't name, and all of it way too calm for what this situation called for. My brain caught up to my body about 2 full seconds after it should have. I scrambled, I don't have a more elegant word for it. I scrambled backwards across that bed like my life depended on it, which honestly it might have. I was on my feet before I even registered standing, and I was talking, apologizing, before I'd even consciously decided to open my mouth. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I finished the room and I just sat down for 1 second and I would never, this isn't something I would normally do. I promise you, I'm so sorry. I was rambling. I knew I was rambling. My face was burning so hot. I genuinely thought I might be running a fever. My uniform was wrinkled, my hair, which I kept wrapped while I worked, had partially escaped its scarf. I looked exactly as chaotic as I felt. He hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, just watched me spiral with that same unreadable expression, leaning against the doorframe with his arms crossed, still in his travel clothes. Dark trousers, a black shirt, sleeves rolled up to show those tattoos, a carry-on bag on the floor by his feet. He was taller than I'd imagined, and the photographs I'd seen around the house, formal ones, the kind families display in expensive frames, had not done him any favors because they'd made him look approachable. In person, up close in his own space, he was something else entirely. I made myself stop talking. The silence stretched, and then he pushed off the doorframe and walked toward me. I held my ground, barely. Every instinct I had said to step back, but stepping back meant running into his bed, and that felt like exactly the wrong move to make. He stopped close, closer than was polite, closer than was professional. His eyes moved over my face, the way they had when I'd first woken up. That slow, deliberate attention that felt like being taken apart and examined. "You don't have to explain," he said. His English was clean, accented, unhurried. "I do, actually, Alaia." He said my name, which meant someone had told him, or he'd asked or he'd noticed, and none of those options were reassuring, and the sound of it in his mouth made me go very still. "Stop. I'm trying to—" He kissed me. That's it. That's the whole sentence. No warning, no lead-up, no moment where I could have redirected or rationalized or made a better decision. His hand came up, caught my jaw, and he kissed me like it was a conclusion to something, like this was the answer to a question I hadn't known was being asked. For exactly 1/2 of 1 second, my brain went completely offline. Then it came roaring back. I shoved him, both hands flat against his chest, and he was solid, like shoving a wall. But he stepped back because he chose to, which was worse, somehow, than if he'd been moved by the force. And then my hand came up and I slapped him across the face. The sound was sharp, clean. The room went silent around it. His head had turned with the impact. He stayed like that for a moment, profile to me, jaw tight. And I was breathing hard, my hand still raised, my heart slamming against my ribs so violently I was certain he could hear it. "Don't." My voice came out low, steadier than I felt. "Don't you ever." I didn't wait for a response. I picked up my cleaning caddy from the floor by the door, squared my shoulders, and walked out. My hands were shaking the whole way down the hall. Here's the thing about a man like Woojin, and I didn't know this yet. I couldn't have known it then, but I know it now, looking back, and it changes the color of everything that came after. A man like Woojin had never been told no, not in any way that stuck, not in any way that landed, not in any way that made him feel it. He'd grown up at the top of a world that arranged itself around him, around his name, his face, his family's money. And women had been part of that arrangement. Beautiful women, willing women, women who understood the terms without needing them spelled out. He'd never had to chase, never had to want something he couldn't have. Never been in a room where he wasn't the most desirable, most powerful, most certain thing in it. And then a Dominican girl in a wrinkled uniform had slapped him across the face and walked away. And something in him, some part of him that had been bored for longer than he had probably admitted to himself, woke up. I didn't know any of that as I walked down the hall. What I knew was that I needed to find Mrs. Park, confess what happened before Woojin could give his version, and figure out how bad the fallout was going to be. I ran through the scenario in my head, how it would sound, how it would look. A new maid found asleep in the young master's bed. The young master kissed her, she slapped him. And every version of it I could construct ended with me on a plane back to Santo Domingo before the week was out, or worse, given the paperwork situation. My stomach turned. I found Mrs. Park in the staff corridor near the laundry room, going through linen inventory with the meticulous focus she brought to everything. She looked up when I appeared. One look at my face and she set the clipboard down. What happened? I need to tell you something, and I need you to understand that it wasn't... Alaia! Her voice dropped. Tell me slowly. I told her. Not everything. Not the way he'd looked at me. Not the way my brain had short-circuited for that half-second before I'd shoved him. But the facts. I fell asleep in his room. He came back early. He kissed me. I left. She was quiet for a long time. He kissed you? She repeated. Yes. And you... I slapped him and walked out. Another silence. And then, to my absolute bewilderment, Mrs. Park pressed her fingers to her mouth and seemed to be suppressing something. Not distress. Something else. Mrs. Park. I'm not laughing, she said, in a tone that made it clear she was absolutely fighting the urge to laugh. Alaia, listen to me carefully. You are to stay out of his way. Do not enter his room when he's in it. Do not engage with him unless directly instructed to. Keep your head down and your distance, and pray that he finds this boring and moves on. She picked her clipboard back up. Because if he doesn't find it boring... She stopped. If he doesn't... She gave me a look that said more than words would have. Get some rest. You're back on rotation at 5. I tried to stay out of his way. I genuinely tried. The house made it difficult. There were only so many rooms, only so many corridors, and Woojin moved through all of them with the unhurried ownership of someone who had never been told he couldn't be somewhere. I'd be setting the breakfast table, and he'd appear in the doorway, coffee cup already in hand, watching me work with that same expression. Calm, curious, a little too interested. I didn't look at him. I set the table. I left. I'd be in the garden hallway with the floor polisher, and I'd hear his voice behind me, low, unhurried, talking to someone on the phone. And I'd feel it between my shoulder blades like a hand pressing there. Warm and wrong and too present. He didn't push, didn't approach, didn't do anything I could have pointed to and named as a problem. He just watched, consistently, patiently, like he had all the time in the world. On the 3rd day, I snapped. I'd been restocking the library shelves, one of those jobs that took concentration because Madame's organization system was elaborate and she noticed misplacements, and I'd been there maybe 20 minutes when I became aware that I was no longer alone. I didn't turn around. There's a sitting room, I said, keeping my eyes on the shelves. 3 doors down. Very comfortable chairs. I know. His voice was closer than I'd expected. I kept my expression neutral. I prefer it here. The library is being cleaned. I'm not stopping you. Your being here is stopping me. I turned then, because the alternative was letting him stand behind me indefinitely, and something about that felt worse than facing him. He was leaning against one of the reading tables, arms crossed, that slight almost smile doing exactly what it was designed to do. I'd like to finish my work. Finish it. I can't focus with you.
I stopped, took a breath. Is there something you need, sir? He tilted his head. You don't have to call me that. It's my job to call you that. I'm asking you not to, and I'm asking you to let me do mine. I held his gaze. Neither of us moved. Please. He looked at me for a moment longer. That careful, measuring look that I was beginning to understand was just how he saw things, how he processed the world. And then he uncrossed his arms and pushed off the table. Alaia, he said. Just my name, no follow-up. He said it like a statement, like a fact he'd confirmed, and then he walked out of the library and left me standing there with my heart in my throat and a duster in my hand. I went back to the shelves. It took me another 10 minutes to stop my hands from trembling. By the end of his first week home, I'd developed a system. I tracked his schedule, subtly, carefully, and arranged my cleaning rotations around it. He worked out in the private gym from 7 to 8:30. He had calls from 9 to 11. He spent the afternoons in his study or out of the house entirely. The windows of safety were predictable if you paid attention. The problem was that Woojin seemed to also be paying attention. To me, I noticed it in small ways first. My breakfast tray, which I ate alone in the small staff dining area off the kitchen, started arriving with an extra item. Once it was a slice of mango, perfectly cut, the kind of careful preparation that took time. Once it was a small pot of coffee, darker roast than what was standard. I didn't ask about it. I didn't want to know. Then I started finding things. A cardigan left folded on the bench outside my room door one evening, after I'd complained to another maid about the corridor being cold. Nothing on it to indicate where it came from. Just there. Expensive fabric. Soft. I left it on the bench for 2 days before I brought it inside, because the corridor was cold, and I was tired of being cold, and I was furious at myself for bringing it inside. The other maids noticed. I could see it in the way they looked at me, not unkindly, mostly. Some with curiosity, one with something that might have been envy. None of them said anything to me directly, but I heard the whispers in the kitchen when they thought I was out of earshot. Young master has been different since he got back. He asked Hannah which maid worked the East Wing rotation. Did you see him watch her at dinner service? Just stood there in the doorway the whole time. I pretended I hadn't heard. I did my job. I kept my head down. I thought about the paperwork in my bag and the consequences of being noticed, and I pushed his face out of my mind every time it appeared there, which was more often than I was willing to admit. You're running from me. I was in the second-floor corridor, replacing the hallway flowers. Madame got fresh arrangements 3 times a week. When he said it, I thought the floor was empty. I checked. I hadn't checked well enough. I kept my hands on the flowers. I'm working. You rearranged your whole schedule. He was behind me, not close, but present. 3 days ago, you were on the East Wing in the evenings. Now you're on the East Wing in the mornings. Yesterday you finished the main floor in half the time you normally take. I turned around. You've been timing me. I've been noticing. He shrugged, easy and unbothered. There's a difference. There's really not. Why are you scared of me? The question landed harder than it should have. Not because it was aggressive. It wasn't, it was genuine, almost soft, which was somehow worse. But because it assumed something I wasn't ready to name. I'm not scared of you, I said carefully. Then why? I'm scared of this job. My voice came out harder than I'd planned. I'm scared of losing it. I'm scared of what happens to me if I get sent home. I have people counting on me, and I cannot. I stopped, reoriented. I can't afford to be a story you tell your friends about the interesting summer in Seoul. The flippancy I'd expected, some version of it, didn't come. His expression shifted into something more serious, something that looked almost like the impact of what I'd said actually landing. I'm not trying to make you a story, he said. Then what are you trying to do? He looked at me for a long moment. I don't know yet. That's not reassuring. No. He almost smiled. It's not. I turned back to the flowers. My hands were steadier than they'd been the first time, and I was proud of that. I'm going to finish my rotation now. He didn't follow, but I felt him there until I turned the corner. I should have transferred to a different wing. I should have talked to Mrs. Park, manufactured some reason to shift rotations entirely, made myself harder to find. That was the smart move, the safe move. Instead, I found myself, 10 days after he came home, pausing outside his study because there was music coming from inside. Old music, something American and low and melancholy. And I don't know why I stopped. I don't know why I stood there for a full 30 seconds with my hands on my cart, listening to a song I half-recognized filter under the door. I know why. I just don't want to say it out loud. The study door opened. He didn't look surprised to find me there. He leaned against the frame. That door-frame lean was apparently his signature move, and tilted his head slightly. You can come in. I was just... The orchid on the shelf needs water. You're on plant rotation. He stepped back from the door. Come in. He was right. The orchid did need water. That was a legitimate, inarguable reason to enter the room, and we both knew it, and we both knew that wasn't why I was standing there. I came in. The study was warmer than the corridor. Books everywhere. Real ones, not decorative. And the desk was covered in what looked like architectural plans, blueprints, notes in both Korean and English. He was working on something. The music was coming from a small speaker on the shelf, and the song I'd half recognized became fully recognizable as I moved further into the room. I watered the orchid, carefully, precisely, doing exactly what I was supposed to be doing. You know this song? He asked. I didn't turn around. My mother used to play it. Where are you from? Dominican Republic. A pause. You're far from home. I set the watering can down and turned to face him. He was sitting on the edge of the desk, not at it, watching me. Yeah, I said. I am. Do you miss it? Nobody in this house had ever asked me that. Not Mrs. Park, not the other staff, certainly not Madam. It was such a simple question, and it cracked something open in my chest that I immediately pressed back together. I miss my mother's cooking, I said, keeping my voice even. And the noise, it's very quiet here. Something in his face softened. This house has always been too quiet. I picked up my cart. I should get back to rotation. Alaia. I stopped at the door. I know you're trying to do the right thing, he said. I'm not trying to make it harder. I didn't have an answer for that. I nodded once, not looking at him, and kept walking. 2 days later, I made an actual mistake. Not falling asleep, not lingering outside the study. An actual real mistake with actual real consequences. I knocked a glass from the breakfast table, clearing the dining room. A crystal glass, part of a set, and it hit the marble floor and fractured into 3 pieces, and the sound seemed to go through the whole house. I was down collecting the pieces before they'd finished settling. Careful! Woojin's voice from the doorway. He was on his way out, jacket on, keys in hand. You'll cut yourself. I have it! My voice was tight. I have it! Sharper than I'd meant, panic sharpening everything. A broken crystal glass in the Hyunju household. I didn't know what that cost. I didn't know what Madam would say. I didn't know if this was the thing that tipped the balance. and made someone look more closely at the new maid from Santo Domingo who'd arrived with perfectly neat paperwork that would fall apart under 5 minutes of scrutiny. I was putting the pieces on the tray with hands that were no longer steady. "Hey." Softer now. He'd crossed the room, crouched down near me without touching me. "Hey, look at me. I need to clean this up. It's a glass. It's a crystal glass and it's part of a set, and Alaia." Low, direct, somehow cutting through everything. "Look at me." I looked at him. Up close, crouched on the marble, he looked different than he did standing. Less imposing. More human. His eyes were doing that thing again. Careful, focused, like I was the only thing in the room that mattered. "I'll handle the glass," he said. "That's not your job." "I know. Woojin." His name came out before I could stop it. His actual name, not Sir, and the moment I heard myself say it, I saw something shift in his face. "I can't accept help from you. Do you understand that? I can't be seen as someone you're—" "I know," he said again, patient. "I'll handle it and no one will make anything of it. I break things all the time." The almost smile. Ask anyone in this house. I looked at him for a moment longer than I should have. "Thank you," I said quietly. He nodded, didn't make it into anything, just stood, took the tray from me with the pieces of glass on it, and carried it to the side table. I finished clearing the breakfast table. Neither of us talked about it. That evening, something shifted. I don't know how else to describe it. It wasn't one thing. It was the culmination of everything. The music through the door, the cardigan on the bench, the glass, his voice saying, "Look at me," in a room full of marble and morning light. It was the weeks of proximity and the effort of resistance, and the way he looked at me like I was a problem he was genuinely, honestly invested in solving. I was finishing the evening rounds on the East Wing, last rotation of the day, almost done, when I found him in the corridor outside my room, not waiting, not approaching, just there, leaning against the wall, phone in hand, not even looking at the phone. I stopped, he looked up. "This is my hallway," I said. "Staff corridor." He said it lightly. "I was told there's a maintenance issue with the heating panel at the end." I looked down the corridor. The heating panel was fine. I'd walked past it 3 minutes ago. I looked back at him. "Woojin. Alaia." We were doing the name thing again. The thing where we said each other's names like they meant something, like they were the actual conversation underneath the conversation we were pretending to have. "This can't happen," I said. It came out steadier than I felt. "You don't know what this is yet." "I know what it could turn into. And that scares you." "Yes." I held his gaze. "It should scare you too." "It doesn't. That's because you don't have anything to lose." The words came out with more edge than I'd intended. "You get bored of this, you move on. I get interesting to you for a summer and then you go back to university and I stopped. "I have everything to lose, my job, my ability to send money home, my safety. Do you understand that?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he stepped away from the wall. Toward me. 1 step. Slow enough that I could have moved back if I'd wanted to. I didn't move. "I hear you," he said. "I'm not asking you to risk anything." "Then what are you asking?" Another step. We were close now, the same distance we'd been in his room that first morning, the morning with the kiss that had slapped me back into my senses. But this time, neither of us had momentum carrying us somewhere unplanned. This was a choice. Both of us standing here, in this corridor, making it. "I'm asking you to stop running long enough to let me figure out what this is," he said. "That's all." I looked at him, the tattoos, the careful eyes, the face that had no business looking this open. And I felt the exact thing I'd been protecting myself against for 3 weeks settle in my chest, like it intended to stay. "You're going to complicate my life," I said. "Probably. I'm going to regret this. Maybe." His voice was quiet. Maybe not. And I don't know what I would have done next. I genuinely don't. because maybe I would have made the smart decision. Maybe I would have remembered the paperwork, the stakes, the ceiling fan in Santo Domingo, and the things I couldn't afford to lose. Maybe I would have walked into my room and closed the door, but I didn't get the chance to find out because he leaned forward, slow, nothing like that first time, nothing impulsive or entitled about it, just careful and warm and asking. And this time, I didn't push him away. His mouth found mine, and the corridor went quiet around us, and for the first time since I'd arrived in this country, I stopped thinking about every single thing I was afraid of. It lasted exactly long enough to undo all my careful distance, exactly long enough to confirm that I was undeniably, comprehensively in trouble. And then, Woojin! The voice came from the end of the corridor like a thunderclap. We broke apart. My heart dropped through the floor. He turned slowly, far more slowly than the situation called for, and there, framed in the corridor entrance in a silk evening robe, perfectly put together even in the middle of the night, was Madame Hyun, his mother, staring at us. Her face cycled through several expressions in rapid succession: shock, confusion, recognition, and then something that gathered itself into a single word. "What?" she breathed, voice rising. "Is this?"
Alaia had 17 ways to die in that moment. She was pretty sure she was about to try all of them. And Woojin, he just straightened up, met his mother's eyes, and said absolutely nothing. Which, as it turned out, was its own kind of answer. That's part 1. And I need you to understand, it only gets worse from here. Or better. Depends on how you look at it. If you're already invested, and come on, you are, hit subscribe and turn on notifications because part 2 is coming and Madame Hyun does not play. At all. Like, this woman is about to make Alaia's complicated life even more complicated in ways that no one is prepared for. Comment below. Team Woojin, or is Alaia absolutely right to run? Because honestly, I get both sides. I really do. Part 2 drops soon. Don't miss it.